The wind pushed against her face like it had a grudge. Cold, sharp, and full of warnings. June tucked her arms tighter around her ribs, her coat long lost somewhere back in Kansas, traded for half a stale loaf of bread and a promise that never came true. Her bare feet were numb now, not even stinging anymore, just dull like her mind, like the world. She didn't cry. Hadn't in days. Not since she left the barn behind, the one with the busted lock where she'd hidden for 2 nights, curled up in straw like an unwanted animal. The Wyoming sky stretched wide above her, pale and unforgiving. The land didn't care if you were broken. It didn't care if you'd been loved once and lost everything. June dragged one foot in front of the other, numb to the ache in her calves, the blisters on her heels, the blood dried in the cracks of her toes. Her dress hung off her like an old curtain, torn and sagging, clinging to her knees with every gust of wind. A button had popped off days ago, and her collar hung open at the throat where bruises still hadn't faded. No one saw her out here. That's how she liked it, how she needed it. If someone looked too long, they'd ask questions. They want answers. June had no answers left to give. Only silence. Only the tight knot in her chest that kept her moving forward because going back would kill her. The last town she'd passed through, Rollins, had turned its back on her like the rest. She'd asked for bread. Just bread. The woman at the bakery had closed the door in her face without a word. No charity here. June wasn't surprised. It was written all over her. Dirt on her skin, hollowness in her eyes, the kind of quiet that made folks nervous. She didn't remember when the hope started fading. Maybe it was the night her mother's hands stopped moving, or when her stepfather's belt came down on her back, then again, until all the softness in her heart bled out. Maybe it was when she ran, just after the baby. No, she didn't want to think about that now. Couldn't. If she thought about it, she'd fall to her knees and never get up again. There was no plan. Just one foot, then the other. Cold earth. Sharp rocks. The sky. She hadn't eaten in 3 days. Her belly had stopped growling. It had given up too. But she'd keep moving until the wind stopped hurting her face. Until the hills stopped shaking beneath her. Until something changed. Until something ended. Behind her, clouds were rolling in, heavy and low, and the air smelled like snow. She knew what that meant. Nights like this could freeze a body stiff by morning. Still, June kept walking, following a dirt trail that didn't even deserve to be called a road. There were no tracks, no wagon ruts. Just her own bloody footprints, washed away each time she stepped into a puddle. The land was quiet, except for the wind. That sound never left her, like a voice whispering things she didn't want to hear. Telling her she was alone. Telling her no one was coming. That men like her stepfather were everywhere, and people like her mother, weak, soft, always forgiving, were dead or dying. June wanted to scream at the sky sometimes. Just scream until her throat tore. But she knew better. Screaming didn't help. It only made men hit harder. As she crested the next hill, something moved in the distance. A shape, big, steady, a horse. Her heart stuttered, then quickened as her eyes focused. A rider heading in her direction. Panic shot through her spine like fire. She crouched low, ducked behind a tangle of dead brush, her breath quick and sharp at her chest. Her fingers dug into the cold earth. The last time a man on horseback found her, he offered her a ride and then tried to take more than she was willing to give. She still had the scar on her thigh where she bit his hand until he screamed and let her go. She waited. The rider slowed, then stopped. Didn't get down. Just looked around. June barely breathed. If she stayed still, maybe he'd pass. The seconds dragged. She stared through the thorns and dust and dead grass, squinting. He wasn't wearing a badge. Wasn't a bounty hunter, not with that slouch in the saddle. Something about him looked tired, not like the others. Not like the men who smiled too wide or looked too clean. She was about to crawl backward when his voice reached her. Soft low. You hiding from me, miss? June froze. I ain't here to hurt you, he said again. But you look like you're about to fall dead, and I don't got it in me to ride past and leave you. The voice was steady. Not kind exactly, but not cruel either. Her fingers twitched. She didn't answer. Didn't move. The man shifted in his saddle. "You don't have to trust me, but I'm getting off this horse and setting a blanket down right here. If you want it, it's yours. If not, I'll ride on." June heard leather creak. A soft thud. A blanket landed in the dirt not far from her. Then silence. More silence. She peeked over the brush. The man had backed away. His horse stood quiet. He looked older than her. Maybe 30. Dust on his boots. A rifle strapped across his saddle, but not in his hands. Brown hat low over his eyes. His face was unreadable, jaw dark with stubble. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't looking at her. Just waiting. Something inside her shifted. Not trust. Not hope. But something. She crawled out slowly, every joint screaming. Her hand shook as she reached for the blanket, fingers grabbing it fast like it might disappear. She wrapped it around herself without meeting his eyes. He didn't say anything, just watched her for a beat, then nodded once. "You hungry?" Her stomach clenched. "I got jerky and some beans. Nothing fancy, but it's hot." He walked a few feet away and knelt beside a small fire pit he'd already started. Coals glowed faintly. A pot hung above them, steam curling up like a ghost. June didn't move. She just sat there, blanket tied around her, heart slamming in her chest like a trapped bird. What if he was just softening her up? What if the kindness turned into something else the moment she let down her guard? Still, the smell of the beans reached her nose, rich and warm, and something in her broke. Not all the way, just a little, just enough to make her whisper, "Why?" He looked up. "Why what? Why help me?" He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because once someone helped me when I didn't deserve it either." June didn't believe in kindness. Not really. But the man didn't move toward her. Didn't even ask her name. Just stirred the beans and waited. And for the first time in months, June let herself sit beside another human being without running, without fighting. She didn't speak again. Not that night. But she ate the beans. And when he handed her a second blanket, she took it. And when she lay down by the fire, not too close but not out in the dark either, she let herself fall asleep for the first time in days. Still scared, still numb, but not alone. In the morning, she'd decide if she trusted him. Maybe he was different. Maybe he wasn't. But last night, a stranger looked at her and didn't see trash. He didn't ask what she'd done or what had been done to her. He just said, "You're safe now." And for one night, maybe she was. When June woke, the fire was just a pile of glowing embers, and frost laced the edges of the blanket that covered her. She blinked up at a sky smeared with pale morning light, and for a moment, didn't know where she was. But then she turned her head, saw the man from the night before crouched near his horse, checking the saddle straps. And it all came back, the cold, the beans, the way he hadn't asked anything of her. He didn't notice she was awake at first. She studied him quietly. There was something in the way he moved, slow but sure, like a man who'd lived a lot of life and carried it all on his shoulders. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots patched at the toe. He looked like someone used to working alone, someone who didn't ask for company but didn't mind it when it came. She sat up, pulling the blankets tighter around her. The rustle must have caught his ear because he turned, tipped his hat in a small greeting. "Morning," he said. "Coffee's hot, if you're the type." June didn't answer right away, but she did nod. That was something. He poured a cup into a tin mug and set it down a few feet away, careful not to step too close. She waited until he backed off before crawling over and wrapping her hands around the warmth. "Name's Amos," he said finally. "Amos Ward." June looked at him over the rim of the mug, steam rising into her face. "June," she said. "Just June." He nodded like that was all he needed. No questions about where she came from, who she was running from. Just silence, the kind that let her breathe without feeling hunted. They rode together by mid-morning, her barefoot still, but riding behind him on the horse. She didn't speak much, and he didn't press. The road curved through open country, low hills and pine groves dusted in frost. Around noon, They passed a fence line and an old hand-painted sign that read Eagle Creek Ranch. "This is where I work," Amos said. "Help keep the herds, fix what's broken. Boss lets me stay out in the bunkhouse. Plenty of space if you want to warm up a few days." June didn't answer, but she didn't say no either. As they neared the main house, a dog barked sharply, and a tall figure stepped out onto the porch. A woman, maybe in her 40s, with sleeves rolled up and gray streaks in her thick black braid. She had a shotgun resting easy in one arm and a look that could cut through stone. "Amos Ward," she called. "Who's that you brought up behind you?" Amos lifted a hand in greeting. "Found her walking just east of the pass. Half frozen. Ain't causing trouble." The woman's eyes narrowed. She stepped off the porch and came closer, giving June a hard look. "And when I asked, 'What's your name, girl?' June straightened instinctively. "June. June what?" She didn't say. Amos cut in. The woman's eyes flicked between them, reading something silent. "Fine," she said. "Long as she pulls her weight and don't steal, she can stay. Otherwise, she's out." Amos gave a nod. "Understood, Miss Calhoun." That was June's first meeting with Joe Calhoun, the owner of the ranch and a woman with more scars than she let on. Joe had built the place up from nothing after her husband disappeared 10 years back. Some said he ran off with a saloon girl. Others said Joe buried him somewhere on the property. No one asked too many questions, and Joe didn't offer answers. Inside the main house, the kitchen smelled of wood smoke and sourdough. A younger man, barely 20, sat at the long table, peeling potatoes with a bored look. He looked up when June stepped in, his eyes curious. "That her?" he asked. "The one Amos found?" "This is Cole," Amos said to June. "Joe's nephew." Cole stood and offered a hand, all charm and lopsided grin. "Pleasure." June didn't shake it, just looked at him and sat down at the far end of the table. Cole shrugged and went back to peeling. "Suit yourself." Amos helped her settle in the bunkhouse, a low stone building just past the barn. It was clean but cold, with 2 beds, a stove, and not much else. He left her there with some jerky, a canteen, and a promise to bring boots in the morning. June didn't sleep much that night, not because she was afraid, but because the silence was too unfamiliar, too quiet. Over the next few days, she learned the rhythms of the ranch. Joe ran it with military order. Cole did what he was told, mostly. Amos worked harder than anyone and talked the least. June helped where she could, milking goats, sweeping out stables, feeding chickens. No one praised her, but they didn't stop her either. She kept her head down and listened. Joe watched her with sharp eyes. Sometimes it felt like the woman was trying to figure her out, see what secrets were packed behind June's quiet. One night, after supper, Joe lit a cigarette and leaned against the porch post beside June. "You ever shoot a man?" Joe asked without turning her head. June blinked. "No." "Good. Let's keep it that way." June didn't reply, but she knew the question wasn't a warning. It was a test. Joe wanted to know how much danger had just walked onto her land. Cole, on the other hand, kept trying to get close. He'd bring her extra bread at breakfast, lean in with stories about town, or talk about his dead mama like it made them kindred. June didn't trust that grin. He was too eager, too curious. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked one afternoon while they fed the horses. June didn't answer. "I mean, you seem smart. Could probably go east. Find work. Get married. I'm not looking for any of that." Cole leaned on the stall rail. "Well, you might not be looking, but things find you anyhow." His eyes lingered too long. She stepped away. It was Amos who made her feel not safe exactly, but grounded. He never asked personal things, never stood too close. But he noticed when her hands trembled and always made sure the fire was lit in the bunkhouse before nightfall. One evening, after everyone else had gone quiet, June found him in the barn repairing saddle. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "You don't know me." "No, but I know enough." He stopped working and glanced over. "I've done things I'm not proud of. Been on the run. Slept in ditches. Had men chase me with rope in their hands." "Why'd they chase you?" He met her eyes. "Because I stole something I had no right to." June frowned. What was it? My brother's life. The silence between them grew thick. June didn't ask more, but something shifted again, deeper this time. Secrets lived in every corner of that ranch. In Joe's missing husband, in Cole's smooth words, in Amos's haunted past. And June, for the first time, wasn't just passing through. She was inside it, entangled, and she knew, deep down, that this wasn't a place she could disappear in forever. Something was coming. She could feel it in the way Joe's eyes followed her, in the edge under Cole's questions. In the silence Amos carried like a wound. The ranch was calm now, but it wouldn't stay that way. The days on the ranch began to settle into a rhythm June hadn't known in years. Wake early, work, stay quiet, watch. The Wyoming sky stretched endless over her head each morning, and the cold in her bones began to lift little by little. She started wearing the boots Amos found for her in the barn storage, a size too big, but a mercy all the same. Her hands calloused, her steps steadied, and some part of her, small and buried, started to believe maybe she'd found something close to stillness. Not peace, but a place to breathe. Still, something in the air was shifting. At first, it was small things. A gate left open when June knew she'd latched it. Tools moved from one stall to another. The feeling of eyes on her back when she walked to the well alone. Joe noticed too. One evening, she stormed into the bunkhouse just after sunset, cheeks red with cold and fury. Someone's been opening the south pasture gates. Nearly lost 3 calves, she snapped. You two were the only ones out there this morning. June stood frozen by the stove, stood on her hands, heart pounding. Amos didn't flinch. I checked the fence myself, he said evenly. It was fine when I passed through. Then explain how the damn thing's swinging open in the wind. June swallowed. You think I'm doing it? Joe turned to her, eyes hard. I think I don't know you. You show up out of nowhere with bruises and a story you won't tell. That makes it real easy to think you're hiding more than a past. Amos stepped forward. She's not the one sabotaging your ranch, Joe. And you'd stake your life on that, would you? He didn't answer, but the air between the 3 of them thickened like storm clouds. That night, June lay awake in the bunkhouse, her back to the wall, staring at the ceiling. The gate, the tools. Someone wanted Joe on edge, wanted suspicion in the air. The question was why and who. The answer started to take shape the next afternoon when June returned early from feeding the goats and found Cole in the barn, rummaging through Amos's saddlebag. He jumped when he saw her, eyes wide, then narrowed. Don't sneak up on people, he snapped. What are you doing? She asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just curious what old Amos is hiding. Everyone's got something, don't they? June stepped closer. If you think he's the one messing with Joe's fences, why not say so? Cole gave a soft laugh. Oh, June, you really think I'm the one causing trouble? He took a slow step toward her. Or are you just looking for someone to pin things on, now that people are starting to notice you? June's fist clenched. You don't scare me. He leaned in, his voice dropping. You should be scared of someone, June. If you knew half the things Amos has done, you wouldn't be looking at him like he's some savior. She shoved past him and left the barn without another word. But Cole's word stuck in her chest like a thorn. What had Amos done? He said he stole his brother's life. What did that mean? Why was Cole digging? Later that evening, Joe pulled Amos aside behind the barn, voice low but sharp. June only caught a few words: theft, firearm, and wanted poster. When Amos returned to the bunkhouse, his face was pale, set. June finally asked what happened. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing the back of his neck. Joe got a wire from Laramie. Says someone matching my name and face is wanted down south. Robbery, horse theft, possible manslaughter. June blinked. Is it true? He looked her in the eyes. Not the way they tell it. She believed him, but it didn't matter. Not to the law. Not to Joe. The next day, everything came undone. Joe called everyone to the corral after dawn. She had a folded paper in her hand and a rifle over her shoulder. This here's a federal notice, she said, voice cold. Says Amos Ward's wanted for questioning in connection to a robbery in Arkansas. A man died. Amos stood quiet beside the fence. That robbery happened, but the man who died wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't fire a shot. Cole stepped forward, a smirk just barely hidden. Doesn't change the fact your name's on the poster. June watched it all unfold with a sick feeling in her stomach. Amos looked cornered, shoulders tight. Cole looked too satisfied. Then Joe said, "You got 2 days to leave." After that, I sent a notice to the sheriff myself. June waited until dark to go to him. He was saddling his horse under the trees near the edge of the property. "You're leaving." "I don't have a choice," Amos said. "Joe gave me a place. I won't make her regret it." June's throat burned. "And you're just going to disappear?" "Let Cole get what he wanted." Amos looked at her then. Really looked. "I'm not what you think, June. I've killed a man before. Not on purpose, but I did it. Doesn't matter if I meant to or not." She stepped closer. "That doesn't make you like the ones I ran from." His eyes softened. "No, but it means I'm not safe to be around either." June wanted to scream. She wanted to ask him to fight for something. For her. But the words caught in her throat. The next morning, Amos was gone. For a week, things were colder. Joe kept June busy. Harder chores, no soft looks. Cole took every chance to smirk and corner her in the barn, his words full of things he didn't say out loud. Then came the fire. It started in the far barn, late at night. Flames licked the roof before anyone saw them. June woke to shouting and smoke. She ran barefoot across the yard, Joe already dragging water barrels, Cole nowhere to be seen. They fought it for over an hour. Lost 3 horses. The feed stock. Joe's temper. When the flames were finally out, June turned to Joe, panting. "You think it was Amos?" Joe shook her head, eyes distant. "No, he'd never do this." June's blood ran cold. Then who? They both knew. The next day, Joe searched the bunkhouse while Cole was out. Found a matchbox and a bottle of lamp oil under his bed. June stared at it, sick rising in her throat. He did it. He set the fire. He wanted Amos gone. He wanted. Joe raised a hand. "I'll handle it." But that night, June saw Joe at the telegraph office in town. She was sending a wire to Cheyenne. A bounty wire. For Amos. And that was when June broke. She rode out at dawn, took Joe's second horse, and didn't look back. She had no plan. Just Amos's name and the knowledge that he was still out there, riding alone, running from shadows that weren't all his. But June was done running. Whatever secrets Amos carried, whatever blood stained his past, he was the first person in years who saw her as something more than broken. And now, she'd find him. She'd find him before the law did. Because the twist wasn't that Amos was the criminal. It was that Cole was. And June, quiet, scared June, was the only one left willing to prove it. The cold wind cut across the open plains as June rode with nothing but a blanket wrapped tight and a half-spent canteen tied to her saddle. The morning frost had settled on her eyelashes by the time the ranch was a speck behind her. Every hoofbeat pressed deeper into a choice she couldn't undo. She hadn't left out of impulse. She left because she couldn't stomach another day watching truth get buried beneath charm, or seeing Amos blamed for what someone else had lit on purpose. But the land was wide, and she didn't know where he'd gone. The first day she rode without seeing a soul. The second day, she found a trail, 2 sets of prints veering off toward the river pass. 1 horse, 1 man. She followed, even when her thighs screamed and her back ached. She didn't care. She only knew she had to get to Amos before the law did. Or worse, before Amos gave up and vanished for good. She found him camped beneath a ledge near Devil's Rock, tending a small fire with the same calm he carried everywhere. He looked up, startled, when she rode in, then stood slowly as she dismounted. "I told you to stay back," he said, his voice low. "You did," June said, brushing her hair back from her face, "but I didn't listen." He shook his head and looked away, jaw tight. "Joe sent you." "She sent a bounty wire," June said. "But I saw her, and I saw what she found in Cole's bunk. You were right. He framed you. The fire, the tools, everything. He's been setting you up from the start. Amos rubbed the bridge of his nose, shoulders sagging. I figured, but it doesn't matter now. There's a price on my head. It matters to me, she said, stepping closer. You didn't run from guilt. You ran because you didn't want anyone hurt. But it's happening anyway. Joe's about to lose her ranch. Cole's getting bolder. And you're out here in the cold like you don't belong to the world anymore. Amos looked at her then, eyes bloodshot with lack of sleep and a lifetime of regret. I didn't ask for you to care, June. I know, she said, but I do anyway. That night, they didn't say much more. They shared a blanket, backs to the fire, and for the first time in a long time, June didn't feel like she had to explain her silences. Neither did he. The next morning, Amos said, "If we go back, we'll have to prove it. More than a matchbox." June nodded. "Then we start there." By the time they returned to the outskirts of Eagle Creek, Joe's ranch looked different. Men from town were on the property. Strangers June didn't recognize, hauling tools and surveying the barns. Amos stopped his horse at the ridge and narrowed his eyes. "That's not her crew." June's heart pounded. "She's selling." "No," Amos said slowly. "She's desperate." They left the horses hidden in a copse of trees and approached on foot. That's when they saw Joe on the porch, hands on her hips, facing Cole, who now wore a revolver on his belt like he'd earned it. "You think I won't shoot you if you keep this up?" Joe barked. Cole laughed. "You won't shoot anyone. And Joe, you lost your nerve when Uncle disappeared." June and Amos ducked behind the stable, listening. "I'm taking what's mine," Cole snapped. "You never had the sense to run this place. I'll be leasing half of it by month's end. Those men, they're investors. Real men. They'll pay good coin once you're out of the way. I took you in when you had no one," Joe growled. "Fed you, raised you, and now I'm repaying you with a future. This ranch will finally be worth something." June turned to Amos. "She needs help. Now." They stepped out from behind the barn just as Cole turned, and his hand went straight to the revolver. June raised both hands. "Don't," he sneered. "You came back with him?" "Drop the gun, Cole," Amos said, voice even but firm. Cole laughed. "Oh, that's rich. You think of the law now? You got a bounty on your head." "No," June said clearly. "You do, or you will. We got the matchbox, the wire records, and I know someone in town who saw you leaving the barn the night of the fire." Cole hesitated. His mouth twitched, fingers flexed. Joe stepped forward. "You so much as twitched that trigger finger, I swear to God." But the gunshot came anyway. Not from Cole's gun, from Joe's. The bullet hit the dirt inches from his boot. Cole froze. Joe's hands were steady now. Her eyes didn't even blink. "I should have done that years ago," she said. "When I found what you'd done to my dog. When I saw the whiskey you gave the hired hand and blamed on me. I should have known the man who killed my husband would grow up to burn my barn." June's heart stopped. "You knew." "I suspected," Joe said, not taking her eyes off Cole. "But I needed proof. And now I've got plenty." Cole's face twisted. "You have nothing." "Wrong," June said, stepping beside Amos. "We have everything." It didn't end with violence. It ended with a quiet walk to town, where Joe personally handed the telegrams and Cole's hidden supplies to the sheriff. Cole didn't speak as he was cuffed. He just stared at June like she'd done something unforgivable. In the days that followed, the air around the ranch changed. The investors were sent packing. Joe called in favors, asked help from neighboring ranchers, and began rebuilding the barn. It wasn't easy. Nothing was. But there was breath in the walls again. Amos stayed. At first, just in the bunkhouse. Then more often in the main house, fixing fences, hauling water, keeping Joe from lifting more than her share. He still spoke little, but June noticed the way his eyes met hers now, without shame. June stayed too. She started sleeping without her boots on. That was new. One evening, as they watched the last beam go up in the new barn, Joe passed Amos a tin cup of coffee and said, "You've still got a bounty in Arkansas." "I know," he said, "but I ain't going back there." She nodded. "Good. Ain't nothing for you there but ghosts." Then she turned to June. "He ever runs again, you come tell me. I'll drag him back myself." June smiled, eyes glinting. If he runs, I'm going with him. The laughter came slow, but it came. Still, June knew peace was never a permanent thing. Not in a world where men like Cole could charm their way into barns and minds alike. But it didn't have to be permanent. It just had to be real. And for now, under the open sky and the scent of new hay, it was. The wind that rolled down from the mountains in early spring carried with it a kind of sharpness, like it was trying to sweep out the rot that had settled during the long winter. For weeks, the ranch had started to look like a place with a future again. Fences mended, cattle counted, smoke in the chimney each morning. Joe moved with the same stubborn fire she always had. But there was something new behind her eyes. Resolve born not of pride, but pain. The kind you don't talk about, just work through. June started helping with bookkeeping. Old ledgers scattered across the kitchen table. Receipts curled at the corners. Entries written in two different hands. Joe's and someone else's long gone. Amos was there too, sanding board for the rebuilt hayloft, quiet, always watching. The three of them had become a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that's what made the letter hit harder than it should have. Joe found it in the post one morning. No return address, just her name scrawled in blocky ink. She opened it while June read aloud the feed order. Her hand stopped. Her eyes didn't blink. "What is it?" June asked. Joe didn't answer right away. She folded the paper, slid it under the ledger, and muttered, "Nothing that can't wait." But it couldn't wait. June knew it. Amos felt it too. He paused when Joe passed him the hammer that afternoon, holding her gaze too long. It wasn't until sundown that Joe handed the letter to June without a word and walked out to the barn. The paper was short and cruel. "If you want to keep what's left of your ranch, you'll tell the lawman in Cheyenne what you know about Amos Ward. I've got proof this time, and you know what I'm capable of." It wasn't signed, but they didn't need a name. June read it twice. Her stomach dropped, slow and steady. Cole might have been locked up in town, but his reach hadn't stopped. Someone was working with him, someone outside the ranch, maybe even in town. Someone had found a way to keep pushing from the shadows. June found Joe leaning against the barn wall, arms crossed, staring out into the dark. "You're not actually thinking about it, are you?" June asked, voice trembling. Joe didn't look at her. "You think this place can survive another fire? Another lie? The bank's already pressing on the loan again. They see a wanted man here. I lose the whole ranch." June stepped closer. "Then let them take it. We'll start over." Joe shook her head, jaw clenched. "This land's all I have left. I buried my husband under the cottonwood by the creek. I taught myself how to hold a rifle because no one else was going to guard this place. You don't let go of that just because it gets hard." June stared at her. "You trade Amos for dirt?" Joe turned on her then. "Don't you dare act like this is easy. You barely know him. I know he's the only one who didn't treat me like something broken. I know he never lied to me. He lied to himself." Joe snapped. "About what he deserves. About who he still is." Behind them, Amos stepped out of the shadows, his face unreadable. "She's right," he said softly. "I've been lying." Joe froze. June turned to him, her stomach flipping. Amos came closer. "The story I told you about the man who died in Arkansas. It wasn't just a stranger. It was my brother's friend. We used to run jobs together. Petty stuff, stealing supplies from convoys, selling fake bonds. But that night, it went too far. They pulled weapons. Someone got spooked. I tried to stop it, but the man who died, he died because I hesitated." June's breath caught. "I've spent years running from that night. Told myself I wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. But I was there. I let it happen. And I didn't try to make it right. Not then." Joe stared at him, silent. "I don't want you to lie for me," Amos said. "Not to the law. Not to the town. And I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." June stepped forward. "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm turning myself in. Tomorrow." "No," June said, her voice cracking. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." His voice broke too. "I can't keep hiding behind your kindness. I've had my second chance. I'm grateful. But this guilt, it's not going anywhere unless I face it." Joe swallowed hard. Her hands shook at her sides. "Then I'll ride with you." Amos's eyes widened. "Joe, I'll tell the sheriff what I know," she said. "All of it. What Cole did. Why suspect about the man he paid off. I'll speak for your character. And I'll make damn sure they hear the whole story." June looked between them, her throat too tight to speak. Amos took her hand. "If I go away, you don't wait for me." She shook her head. "You don't get to decide that." He gave a sad smile. "I don't want you tied to someone who might never come back." June leaned into him. "I'm already tied. That's the point." They left at dawn. Joe and Amos rode ahead. June stayed behind to watch the ranch. The hours stretched long. Her hands trembled with every chore. When the sun dipped low and the wagon didn't return, she feared the worst. But it wasn't the law who came knocking that night. It was the man from the letter. He arrived on foot, face hidden by a scarf, eyes sharp as a blade. He came straight to the barn where June was locking up. "You're June," he said. She stiffened. "Who are you?" "I'm the one Cole paid to make sure Amos never breathes free air again." She stepped back slowly. "You're not getting what you came for." He smiled. "I already did." Before she could run, he lunged, knocking her against the stall. She hit the floor hard, breath punched from her lungs. But she scrambled to her feet, grabbing the iron shovel and swinging with everything she had. It struck his arm hard. He cursed and stumbled. Outside, hooves thundered. Joe's voice cut the night. "June!" June kicked the door open. Amos leapt from the saddle, gun drawn. The man froze. "Drop it!" Amos shouted. The man tried to run. Joe shot once, clean, into the dirt at his feet. He dropped to his knees. Later, after the sheriff took him in and the truth poured out, letters, bribes, names, Amos sat beside June by the fire. "They let me go," he said quietly. Said with Joe's testimony and the new arrest, "There's no case. I'm not a free man, but I'm not a hunted one either." June rested her head on his shoulder. "So what now?" Amos stared at the flames. "I stop running. I stay." She closed her eyes. "Then I'm staying too." It hadn't ended in blood. It hadn't ended in ruin. It had ended with a choice. Not between guilt and freedom. Not between past and present. But between fear and love. And they'd chosen love. The land looked different after the thaw. Not because the mountains had moved or the barns were newer, but because the silence between people no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. The kind of quiet that grows when nothing is hidden anymore. June stood on the porch one morning, a mug warming her hands, watching the lights spill over the fence lines. And for the first time since she arrived, she wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. She was just there, present, grounded, alive. Amos had stayed. True to his word. The bounty had been lifted, not erased, but rewritten. A formal pardon hadn't come yet, but the town saw what he did, how he stood down a criminal, how he turned himself in when he could have vanished. The sheriff kept a close eye, but not with suspicion. More like respect. That was enough for now. Joe had softened in her own quiet way. She still barked at the ranch hands, still kept her boots muddy and her hair tied up with twine. But sometimes she'd sit next to June on the porch, pass her a glass of cold lemonade, and say nothing at all. It wasn't what Joe said that mattered. It was that she stayed, that she trusted again, that she let someone new into her home and let the past unclench its fists. The barn stood tall again, new beams stronger than before. June had helped build it, splinters in her palms, sweat down her spine. She laughed more now, not often, not loudly, but it came easier. Amos worked with the horses, mostly the quiet ones, the ones that flinched when a rope swung too fast. He understood them in a way no one else could. June liked to watch him move among them, not just for his strength or his steadiness, but because of the way they trusted him, even before he'd earned it. Sometimes at night, she'd sit by the fire, sketching, not because she was good at it, but because it helped to see things take shape in front of her. The outline of Joe's crooked porch, Amos's profile in lamplight, the ranch dog curled by the stove. These were the small truths that made a life. Not perfect, not dramatic, but real. One evening, After the sun had sunk and the crickets began their song, Amos sat beside her on the porch and asked quietly, "You ever think about what you'd be doing if none of this had happened?" June thought for a while. "No," she said, "because I think I was always meant to end up here, even if I had to lose everything else to get here." Amos nodded slowly. "I think about it sometimes. If I'd spoken up that night, if I'd stayed and faced it all back then." "You weren't ready," she said. "None of us are until we're forced to be." He smiled faintly. "You think I've done enough now? That it counts." June looked at him, saw the years behind his eyes. "You're not the same man who showed up on this land. You made different choices this time. That's what counts." There were no grand celebrations, no parades, no newspaper headlines. Just another sunrise, another fence to mend. But June didn't need fanfare. She didn't need the world to know what they had all survived. She just needed one hand holding hers under the stars and the smell of cut hay in the morning. Still, not everything healed clean. Some nights, she dreamed of frostbitten feet and hollow stomachs. Some mornings, she woke before dawn, heart racing. Amos understood. He never asked questions when she slipped out to walk the pastures. He just walked beside her. In Joe, she'd been writing letters. To a cousin she hadn't spoken to in decades. To the bank manager. To the family of the man Amos had once wronged. Not all of them replied, but some did. Forgiveness doesn't always come in one piece. Sometimes it shows up in small envelopes, months later, sealed with understanding. June kept the matchbox that had started everything in a tin under her bed. She didn't keep it as a trophy. She kept it because it reminded her that one small thing, a lie, a flame, a betrayal, could nearly ruin a life. But also that one small thing, like telling the truth, could rebuild it. One afternoon, Joe walked into the kitchen with a letter in hand and set it on the table in front of June. It was from the state. The official seal stamped at the top. June opened it slowly. Her hands didn't shake. Amos's name was there. So was the word exonerated. When she told him, he didn't say a word. Just took her hand, pulled her in, and let out a breath so deep it seemed to carry years with it. That night, under a soft breeze and a sky blooming with stars, June lay beside him, her head on his chest, and whispered, "You're free now." "I was free," he said, "the moment you said you believed me." And for the first time, June believed it too. She believed that people could change, that truth could survive even after betrayal, that love wasn't always loud. It could be quiet, steady like the beat of a heart just learning how to trust again. They didn't ride off into the sunset. They stayed, because some stories don't end with escape. They end with a home. One built not from wood and stone, but from forgiveness, from hard-earned truth, and from two people who didn't give up when it would have been easier to run. And in that still, quiet place, where frost no longer burned her skin and guilt no longer chained his steps, they began again.